A leader is watching his army evaporate while an enemy tide rises, so he grabs the one sacred act that's not his to touch. He does it to save the moment, but it risks costing his line the future. And the worst part is, help is closer than he thinks, so why can't he wait? The valley air feels too hot, too still, like the land is holding its breath. Across the rough hills near Michmash, the Philistines gather in numbers that don't look real, chariots, horsemen, and a sea of people. Saul is at Gilgal, and every report tightens the coil another turn, because the clock is part of the test. You can see the fear in what the men do with their eyes, never resting, always searching for a safe place to run. Some wedge themselves into caves and thickets, some crouch behind rocks, some sink into pits like they want the earth to swallow them. A young soldier stays near Saul, spear trembling in his grip, waiting for someone to say, "Now." And some don't just hide, they leave. They cross the Jordan into Gad and Gilead, putting distance between themselves and the coming collision. Saul remains, but the word the text uses is haunting. The people who stay are trembling. It's not just an army thinning out, it's a nation's confidence leaking away, one footstep at a time. Saul has a command hanging over this moment like a blade. Wait. 7 days, according to the set time, until Samuel arrives to offer sacrifices and tell him what to do next. It sounds simple when you're calm. But under pressure, waiting doesn't feel like obedience, it feels like helplessness, and Saul can feel his leadership slipping with every hour. Day 1, you can still tell yourself this is strategy. Day 3, it starts to feel like humiliation. By day 7, the camp has a hollow sound, too much wind between too few voices. Saul scans the horizon for the prophet's silhouette, for the staff, for any sign that the waiting has an end. But the horizon gives him nothing, except dust. The Philistines aren't just out there. In Saul's mind, they're already moving, already tightening a net around Israel's throat. He imagines chariots on the ridges, horsemen cutting off escape, raiders spilling into the passes. And the people around him read his face, because leaders preach with their expressions long before they speak with words. So what happens if he looks unsure? This is the quiet pressure nobody applauds. You can lose a war before a sword is raised, just by losing the people's nerve. Saul hears footsteps leaving at night, the soft scrape of sandals, the hush of men trying not to be noticed. He's king, he's supposed to hold the line. And now the line is turning into scattered dots. So Saul does what anxious leaders always feel tempted to do, he reaches for something he can control. If Samuel isn't here, Saul can still create momentum. He can still look decisive. He can still perform faith in a way everyone can see. And in his mind, maybe that visible act will glue the camp together, if only for one more day. He gives the order, "Bring the burnt offering to me, and peace offerings." The words land heavy. This isn't a casual request, it's a transfer of authority in a single sentence. The young soldier watches, confused, because sacrifices are holy, and holiness has boundaries. Saul's voice is steady, but his hands betray him, quick, urgent, almost impatient with the sacred. The ritual itself is restrained, no spectacle, no theater, just preparation, fire, and smoke. But the atmosphere shifts, like the light cools a fraction and the air thickens. Saul is doing something that looks devout, yet it's powered by panic. He isn't offering worship as much as he's trying to purchase certainty, and the price is obedience. And then the detail that makes this story sting: as soon as Saul finishes, Samuel arrives. Not hours later. Not the next morning. Immediately after. The timing is so sharp it feels like a blade sliding between ribs, because it means Saul wasn't abandoned. He was moments from obedience. But now the smoke is already in the air, and you can't unburn an offering. Saul moves to greet Samuel like nothing is wrong, like he can outrun the meaning of what just happened with a polite welcome. But Samuel's presence changes the temperature of the moment. His eyes go to the altar, to the smoke, to Saul. And then he asks a question that doesn't need volume to be terrifying: "What have you done?" In that question, Saul hears more than accusation, he hears exposure. So he answers the way pressured people answer, with reasons. The people were scattering. The Philistines were gathering. You didn't come within the days appointed. Listen closely and you can hear the real fear underneath every sentence. I was about to be alone. Saul's logic is painfully human. He's not mocking God. He's not trying to start a new religion. He's trying to keep a nation from collapsing in front of him. But that's the trap. Fear can make you treat a command like a suggestion, especially when disobedience looks productive. And Saul is about to say the quiet part out loud. He admits it, I forced myself, therefore, and offered a burnt offering. Not, I rejoiced to worship. Not, I was led by peace. He forced it. He pushed his own soul across a line because waiting felt like death and action felt like life. But in the kingdom of God, forced faith isn't faith, it's control wearing a religious mask. Samuel doesn't debate Saul's stress. He doesn't deny the enemy is real. He goes straight to the heart, you have done foolishly. It's not an insult, it's a diagnosis. Saul's act wasn't merely a mistake in ceremony, it was a fracture in trust. He reached for the steering wheel in a moment he was commanded to wait, and then Samuel names what Saul can't see yet, there was a future attached to obedience. The Lord would have established your kingdom. But now your kingdom shall not continue. That's the grief of this story. Saul doesn't drop dead. The crown doesn't vanish. He stays on the throne, but the after is taken away. That's a different kind of judgment, quiet, slow, and devastating. You can still lead and yet lose lasting favor. You can still win battles and yet forfeit legacy. Samuel's sentence isn't about one bad day, it's about what Saul's choice revealed in the pressure of time. When the deadline tightened, Saul trusted urgency more than instruction, and Samuel adds another line that changes Israel's story, the Lord will seek a man after his own heart. Not a man after public approval. Not a man after quick fixes. A man after his heart, someone who can be trusted with waiting as much as with striking. Saul hears it, but he can't rewind to the moment before the smoke. Notice what the story doesn't do, it doesn't paint Saul as a cartoon villain. It shows a man under crushing responsibility, trying to hold a trembling people together. That's why it hits so close. Because most of us don't rebel with a clenched fist, we compromise with shaking hands, telling ourselves it's necessary. But necessary doesn't always mean faithful. If this story is already poking at something in your own life, deadlines, pressure, the urge to take control, take a second to like the video and subscribe. We tell these stories slowly, with the human tension left intact, because that's where the mirror is. And in a minute, we'll trace the exact moment waiting turned into forcing. Go back to Saul's explanation and watch how fear builds a courtroom in your mind. Exhibit A, my people are leaving. Exhibit B, my enemy is gathering. Exhibit C, the prophet is late. Put together, it sounds airtight. But fear always presents itself as logic, because if it sounded irrational, we wouldn't obey it. So the real question becomes, what did Saul believe waiting meant? Waiting, for Saul, started to mean vulnerability. It meant standing in front of his soldiers with no visible plan. It meant letting the Philistines think Israel was weak. And worst of all, it meant trusting that God's command was not just right, but safe. That's the hidden battle in Gilgal, not Israel versus Philistia, Saul versus the silence between promises, and that's why the sacrifice is so haunting, it's religious activity used as a lever. Saul doesn't wait for instruction, he creates a moment that looks like devotion. Smoke rises, men gather, morale steadies for a breath, so it feels like it worked. But obedience isn't measured by how much it calms the crowd. It's measured by whether you kept the word you were given. The story almost dares you to imagine the alternate timeline. What if Saul had waited just a little longer? What if he had let the camp tremble and still refused to cross the line? Samuel arrives immediately after, meaning obedience was within reach. And that almost is its own kind of grief, the pain of being close enough to do right, and choosing control anyway. Samuel's rebuke also draws a boundary around kingship itself. Saul is king, yes, but he is not the source. He doesn't own the timeline. He doesn't get to redefine command because the situation feels urgent. Israel's monarchy is being taught, early and publicly, that power under God is still under God. And Saul just demonstrated what happens when a crown forgets that. If you are looking for the sin here, it isn't that Saul cared about his people. It's that he let fear rename disobedience as responsibility. He treated the command as flexible, because the consequences felt immediate. But Samuel points to a deeper consequence, one Saul can't feel yet, the loss of a lasting house, a future he won't get to build. There's a sobering mercy in how the verdict lands. Saul isn't struck down, he's warned. The story lets him keep living with the knowledge that one forced moment redirected his line. That's often how spiritual consequences work, not fireworks, but drift. You wake up one day and realize something precious is missing, and you can trace it back to a choice you made under pressure. And for the trembling soldier watching all this, it's a lesson written in real time. The leader's panic becomes everyone's permission slip. When Saul forced the offering, he didn't just cross a boundary, he modeled a way of handling fear. The camp learned, for a moment, that sacred things can be used to manage optics. But what happens to a people when their king starts treating God like a tool? This is why Gilgal matters as a place. It's tied to earlier covenant moments, stones, memory, commitment. And now it becomes the site of a different kind of marker, the moment Impatience rewrote a future. Saul came here to gather a nation, but he leaves it having revealed something about his heart under time pressure. The location stays the same, the trajectory doesn't. If you want a single sentence that captures Saul's tragedy, it's this: he tried to protect the kingdom by breaking the order that held the kingdom together. He thought the threat was outside, chariots, horsemen, numbers like sand. But the turning point happened inside, when he decided waiting was too costly. And the story leaves us with a question that doesn't go away: what do you reach for when God feels slow? Saul is still king after this scene. The battle story continues. Life continues. But something invisible has shifted. The promise of established is replaced with not continue. That's the sober grief. God isn't mocked by our urgency, but neither is he manipulated by our rituals. And when we force outcomes, we may get the moment, while losing the future we were trying to save. If you've ever felt that pressure, like you had to make something happen right now, tell me in the comments. What did waiting cost you, and what did forcing it cost you? And if this episode gave language to that moment, comment the words "I forced it" below. I read every single comment. Subscribe for the next story, and remember, the hardest obedience is often the one that looks like doing nothing. Until the right time arrives.